Bonjour et bienvenue à Language Place. Maintenant, aujourd'hui, dans cette leçon, on va continuer avec la voix active et la voix passive. C'est le deuxième épisode. Si vous n'avez pas encore visionné le premier épisode, allez visionner le premier épisode et revenez ici pour visionner le deuxième épisode. This is the second episode of la voix active et la voix passive. We've already done the first episode. This is the second episode. La voix passive est un moyen d'exprimer une action, une idée en français, en mettant l'accent sur l'objet d'action. Now, how do we do that? How do we transform sentences in active voice to sentences in passive voice? Remember, the first thing to note is the order of active voice and passive voice. For active voice, the order is subjects, verb, and objects. But for passive voice, the order is objects first, verb, and subjects. You mention the object first, then the verb, then the subject. That's the first thing to note whenever you want to transform a sentence in active voice to a sentence in passive voice. The second thing to note is you note the verb used in the sentence. For example, if the verb used in active voice is dormir, or let's not use dormir, let's use tuer, which means to kill. Tuer means to kill. If this verb is used in active voice, which verb will be used in passive voice? This is the formula. Être is always a constant key in passive voice. Être is always used in passive voice. But what follows être? The conjugation of this verb in participe passé. So that gives us être tué. Être tué is used in passive voice if tué is used in active voice. So let's see these sentences. These sentences are in passive voice. These sentences are in passive voice. As you can see, this is a conjugation of the verb être. Look at, we said it, that the formula for passive voice, être is always there, you can see. And then, vendu. This is the participe passé of the verb vendre. You can see, être plus participe passé sont vendus. Now let's come back here. Les poivres sont vendus par l'épicier. Les poivres sont vendus par l'épicier. How do we transform this sentence in passive voice to active voice? The meaning of this is pepper or peppers are sold by the seller or grocer. This means grocer. Peppers are sold, or pepper is sold by the grocer. They don't say peppers in English, they say pepper in English. So, les poivres sont vendus par l'épicier. Pepper is sold by the grocer. How do we transform this sentence in active voice? How do we transform this sentence in active voice? Les poivres sont vendus par l'épicier. Remember, this is already in passive voice. So you take this, which is the subject. This is the subject, this is the object, this is the verb. Subject, object, verb, subject. You take this back here. L'épicier is the real subject in active voice. Remember, épicier is the person that is selling this pepper. L'épicier is the person selling this pepper. So, épicier is the real subject in active voice. Remember, we are not transforming active voice to passive voice now. Instead, we are reversing the process. We are transforming sentences in passive voice to active voice. L'épicier vend. Why vend? L'épicier vend. Why vend? Note that it is the tense of this verb être that shows the real tense of the verb in active voice. Since this is in present tense, you take this and conjugate it in present tense. So l'épicier vend les poivres. L'épicier vend les poivres, and that is the simple format in active voice. L'épicier vend les poivres. Now this is subject, verb, object. L'épicier vend les poivres. Let's see the second sentence. Le roi est beaucoup aimé de ses femmes. Le roi est beaucoup aimé de ses femmes. This means the king is well loved by his wives. Now, how do we transform this sentence in passive voice? How do we transform this sentence in passive voice? Le roi est beaucoup aimé de ses femmes. Remember we said passive voice, être first, then the participe passé. So this is être and then the participe passé. How do we transform this sentence in active voice? The first thing to note is être is conjugated in present tense. Être is conjugated in présent de l'indicatif. And this is conjugated in participe passé. That means this is the real verb used in the sentence in active voice. So this is from the verb aimer. 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 The pronunciation is different, but aimer with ER is the verb in its infinitive form. This is the verb we conjugate in active voice. So, remember we start with the object. We start with the object, which is le roi. The object starts the sentence in passive voice, but the subject starts the sentence in active voice. So, this is actually the real subject in active voice. So, we say, ces femmes. Remember, ces femmes is the subject in active voice, but it is the object in passive voice. This is passive voice. We are changing this now to active voice. Ces femmes. Now, this is conjugated in présent de l'indicatif. Être, conjugated in présent de l'indicatif. That shows that this verb, which is the real verb in active voice, will be conjugated in present tense. That shows ces femmes aiment. Ces femmes aiment beaucoup. Why are we putting beaucoup? Because beaucoup is here. Ces femmes aiment beaucoup le roi. Now, don't get it mixed up. This is passive voice. This is active voice. The reason why we don't have le roi and le roi here is because the order is always different. In passive voice, le roi, which is the actual, le roi, which is the object, starts the sentence. While in active voice, le roi, which is the object, ends the sentence. So, ces femmes aiment beaucoup le roi. His wives, or the wives, actually love him, love the king a lot. His wives love the king a lot. Now, let's see the third sentence. Les délinquants seront tous punis d'ici la semaine prochaine. Les délinquants seront tous punis d'ici la semaine prochaine. How do we turn this or transform this into active voice? This is passive voice. Les délinquants seront tous punis d'ici la semaine prochaine. Now, the first thing to note is this is the object, and in fact the subject is not mentioned. Let's add something to make it a little more complicated. I can say, les délinquants seront tous punis par le gouverneur d'ici la semaine prochaine. D'ici la semaine prochaine. Les délinquants seront tous punis d'ici la semaine prochaine. Now, how do we turn this sentence in active voice? The first thing to do is to note the verb, the real verb, which is punir. Remember, we said since this is passive voice, être plus punir is used for passive voice, while punir is used for active voice. So this shows that this is from the verb être and this is from the verb punir. Être, punir. Être is conjugated in future simple while we have punir, but we add s. Why? Because this is plural. Now, how do we reverse this process? How do we know the actual sentence in active voice? Here is what to do. Remember, the order is reversed already, so we reverse it. Les délinquants seront tous punis par le gouverneur d'ici la semaine prochaine. We start with the real subject, which is le gouverneur. So we start le gouverneur, gouverneur. Then we take the verb punir. In which tense or in what tense do we conjugate the verb punir? Remember, this is in future simple. So punir will also be in future simple. So we say, le gouverneur punira. Le gouverneur punira les délinquants. Le gouverneur punira les délinquants d'ici la semaine prochaine. D'ici la semaine prochaine. What does this mean? This means the governor will punish the criminals by next week. The governor will punish the criminals by next week. Le gouverneur punira les délinquants d'ici la semaine prochaine. Très bien. So all you have to do whenever you want to reverse the order from passive voice to active voice is you note that the subject is actually a facade. This is not the real subject in passive voice. The real subject is the object. So always keep this in mind. If in passive voice it is the object that comes first, in active voice it is the subject that comes first. So you reverse the order and then you note the tense in which être is conjugated in order to know the tense in which you will conjugate the actual verb. For example, this is conjugated in future simple. That's why we are conjugating punir in future simple. And that is all. Bon, très bien. Sur ce, je vais m'arrêter parce qu'on a fini avec la voix active et la voix passive. On se verra dans les prochaines leçons. Merci et à la prochaine.